Have you really done something in the past week that you thought was a little outstanding and no one even knows about it? We're hungry, aren't we? In fact, we are so hungry that you don't even have to worry about flattery anymore. In fact, even if you flattered somebody, they're so starved for recognition, they don't even care. They grab it and they will to believe it. And when they believe it's real, it's not flattery anymore. There's a saying, the hungrier we are, the less particular we are about the hand that feeds us. So we want to look at number one, and always remember when we're saying this tomorrow, you're a genius. Remember the Y stands for you in desperate need of others. The O stands for other. Other people need to be called by their name. Now this is essential to them. I'm thinking of one man who visited this elderly lady, and he was just absorbed in people, and he liked her, and he was talking to her, and after about 2 hours of just conversation, because she was interesting, he happened to actually see a Model T in the garage, and she had kept it intact in the garage all these years. He happened to be a collector of antique cars. So what would naturally flow when he saw this? He complimented her on preserving this car. Now, did he hope to obtain anything? No, in fact, he was already rewarded in meeting a wonderful lady. As he was leaving her home, she handed him the keys to the car. He says, "What's this?" She says, "It's a gift." He says, "What do you mean?" She says, "Well, I haven't known what to do with the car all these years, and you are the first one that's appreciated it. I'd like for you to have it." This begin to show you there's a reward in calling people by name and showing them that you care. All right, let's go to the U. U stands for use it. And we're going to say that you should use it at least twice in every conversation. I don't think more than twice will work. I think it becomes too stereotyped and insincere. I have asked many groups of people, why do you not use people's names? There's only one answer I've ever been able to obtain from anybody. And the answer is, I do not use it because I'm not sure of it. Then I've asked people this, if you were 99 and 9/10% sure of it, would you use it? They'll think for a minute and then they'll say no. Now why wouldn't you take a chance? Well, if you don't use it, they are assuming that you know it, right? And that you can pronounce it correctly. Have you lost anything by not using it? And you've always got a chance that when they finally leave you, they'll give you a card, or you can look up in the phone book, and in your good old time, you can get it down right. But will you gamble now? All right, what if I could show you a system tonight, which I will in a few minutes, where you could have a big billboard in back of them with their name printed out? Would you be tempted to use it during the conversation? All right, let's go on to R. R stands for repetition. Anytime I want to remember, anytime I want recall, I have to have repetition. Now I have some words that we can call. We can say review it, repeat it, recall it every time you see the face. But as you're driving along, could you think of people? Think of their name. In other words, let the recall take place hundreds of times. And then I'd like to share with you my secret that I use on repetition. I'd like to go back to my secretary. I haven't fired her yet. I will. But we have to use her for one more illustration before we fire her. I happen to need a letter from Babcock and Company. And I ask her to go to the file and get it. After 2 hours of going through the closet, she digs it out and hands it to me. Now, it so happens this girl took page 1, which represents the face, and filed it in room 400. She took page 2 of the letter and filed it in room 800 in another closet. Now again, does she have the letter? In your mind, when you meet somebody, do you have the face one place and the name one place? It's not a question of having it. So I say, would you get me a letter from Babcock and Company? So she goes to the closet and digs out page 1. All right, I'm looking over page 1. And I turn it. Where's page 2? She says, there's no problem. It's just 4 floors up in another closet. Do you really want it? Yes, I need page 2. So away she goes. Now, your subconscious is doing what now? Going after the name? Now, doesn't common sense tell us where should that letter be filed? Babcock and Company together, page 1 and page 2. All right, now why don't you make it easier in your subconscious and file the name with the face? Now, have you heard this expression, I can always remember a face? Sure, during a half-hour conversation, how many times do you see the face? But by the way, your eye gauge is picking up 72,000 characters per minute. How many thousand times have you recorded a face during a half-hour conversation? All right, now what if we had a system to have the name with the face? Now, if this was true, when she pulls out page 1 of a letter, she would also have what stapled to it? Page 2. Now, wouldn't that make things simpler? By the way, we fired her now. We don't need her the rest of the evening. But for you, we want to show you how to file the name with the face. Now, if you can do this successfully, and you have in the past said you could always remember a face, what will you have to say in the future about names? If the face and the name are filed together, and you could always remember a face, then are you going to have to say, I can always remember a name? I think about 3 people on that one took a different perspective. They changed their seating position. Why do you have to do that? Well, because you can see we're doing something to you. We're causing you to change a habit. Will that be uncomfortable? I'm afraid so. I'll show you on the board a diagram to show you just how miserable you'll be for 3 weeks. We're going back to cybernetics, and there's a present condition. You are in a process of zeroing in on a self-image which says you can't remember names. Now, we're going to change and create a new self-image tonight that says you can remember names. All right, now, if I am going this way toward a self-image of can't, I have had some variances off course initially in the first stages. And as I have corrected the negative feedback, I am in the final stages of zeroing in on a self-image. Now, on the final stages, there appears to be no negative feedback. In other words, if this were a torpedo and it were 20 feet from a destroyer, would it appear to be correcting? No, but would there be minute corrections taking place every second? This is the difference between a teenager and a matured individual. This will help you understand teenagers. Why do they fluctuate so much? They have a very little background of experience to draw on, and therefore they're making overcorrections and are having a lot of negative feedback. A mature individual seems to make no mistakes in his later years because he's zeroed in on his target. By the way, is it harder to change if you're in the matured stage instead of in the teenage stage? All right, now we're assuming tonight that you are here in the matured stage and you're going to make this kind of a circle. Now, centrifugal force means that when I go around here, there's a tendency for what to happen? For me to be thrown off course. Then every time I move off course, I will have negative feedback telling me that I will have to correct if I'm going to stay on a new self-image. Now, there'll be a temptation for the next 30 days. Instead of obeying the negative feedback to come back on my new course of action, why not just go on over to where I used to be? So what's the temptation? To change the new self-image back to the old self-image and say, forget it. I never could remember names and I never will. then you could be relaxed for the next 3 weeks and you will not accomplish anything. Now, if you stay with this circle into the new self-image, will you be miserable for 3 weeks? I'm afraid so. Isn't it wonderful, though, to be miserable when you know you're becoming better? In other words, you're going to actually endure the centrifugal force throwout. And by the way, how much negative feedback do you think you'll be having? Considerable. This diagram we're going to call a diagram of change. It illustrates the misery involved in change. All right, let's go back to the way we're going to file our letters with page 1 and page 2. Let's look at our hostess's forehead. She has the same name that's on the... Can you see the tack up here on the board? It's still here. Now what we want to do in our imagination is stand up, reach up in the air and pick out a green felt pen, walk back to where she is and ask her if she would please remove her bangs. We're going to write across her forehead, K-A-R-R-I-E, S-W-A-N. And now what if you reach the N, you don't know whether it's spelled E-N or O-N? Does she know what you're doing? No, she hasn't any idea you're writing on her forehead. So you say, how do you spell your name? Now, is that a compliment? It is in the initial stages of meeting someone. It isn't after a year. But we'll assume we just have met her, and we say, now, how do you spell that? Is that spelled S-O-N or S-E-N? She says S-O-N. Then I do what? I finish out. I'm over her left eyebrow. I write S-O-N. Now, every time I look at her, what do I have to see on her forehead? Carrie Swanson. Now, do I have a face and a name together? Now, if I talk to her for half an hour, will I pick up the name as many times as I pick up the face? In other words, we spell the name out on their forehead. Now, if you have spelled it on their forehead, could you use it? There's our billboard. All we do now is look on the forehead, read it off, and use it. Isn't that easy? If I were you, I would spell everybody's name right on their forehead. Now, you could use a paper and pencil, but would that be awkward? Excuse me. Bend around back and write it out. They'd say, what are you doing? Or if you say, I'll use the business card. Everybody doesn't have them. Plus, have you ever had a stack of them? I mean, there's too much to carry around. It's much better to use your computer system and your own filing system in your head. Repetition, I think, is essential to actually remembering names. And this, to me, is real repetition, because even after they have left and the conversation is over and their face comes back in my mind, what's still on it? The name which I have printed beautifully. All right, let's go to the E in your. And this, to me, is the most important one of all of them tonight. E stands for emotion. We learned in night 1 that all achievement is based on emotion. And the emotion we're talking about tonight is love. Really care about people. Do you know anybody tonight that you're in love with that you don't know their name? And the people that you are in love with, how long were you in love with them before you found out what their name was? In other words, we're saying that the minute I begin to care a little about somebody, what do I want to know right away? Who are they? Then there is a direct correlation with the actual ability, the actual feelings that you have for people and your ability to remember their names. Now, what are we really saying? We're saying that if you do not love people, will anything we're teaching you tonight work? There is no shortcut for actual true love. And the motivating force on memory of names has to be love. In other words, if you don't love people, then you can't remember their names. We do not pay attention. If you love, you'll be alert to every single thing about them. If you don't love, you'll not pay attention. You look at the floor, look at the ceiling, look out the window. There's two sides to this story. Let's look at both of them quickly. Number one, let's assume you are looking at the floor or out the window. Do you know why you're doing it? Self-conscious. I heard one man say probably looking down to see whether his shoes shine. Really though, you're doing it because you actually feel like that if I look in your eyes, and by the way, if I'm picking up 72,000 characters per minute and I find disapproval, will my subconscious pick it up? Let's assume that I have dirty fingernails tonight. And let's assume I lay my hand on this table and you take one glance across that hand and see those dirty fingernails. It will register in your eyes. Even though you try to do what? Pretend you didn't see them, pretend you don't let me know that it bothered you. If I'm looking at you, will my subconscious, picking up 72,000 characters per minute, pick it up? Absolutely. All right, how can I avoid your disapproval? Not looking. It's that simple. If I look out the window, I don't know whether you like me or not. And therefore, I never fear rejection. Here's a solution to the problem. The next time in the morning, when you get ready to leave your home, when you leave your bathroom, forget yourself. Do as much damage as you possibly can do before you leave the bathroom and then forget it. In other words, do everything you can do to your hair, everything you can do with your clothes, everything you do with your shoes, and then live for other people all day long. Now let's look at the other side of the coin. What if I walk up to somebody and he won't look at me? He's the one who's looking down. He's the one who's looking out the window. Now some people will think that he's rude. Some people will think that he's in a hurry. Some people will think that he doesn't care about me. Are any of these true? The answer is no, he's self-conscious. But have most people treated him as if he were rude? What an opportunity I have. Every time I find someone that will not look at me, I capitalize them. I study them. Do they know I'm studying them? No, they're looking out the window. They're looking down at the floor. I look them over. I look at the pins they're wearing, their rings, their watch, the watch band, their tie. Now, I'm not trying to find something wrong. I'm trying to find something I can give them a real, true compliment on. If I can't, I find something of mutual interest. And by the way, you can never be caught doing this because you can always tell when they're going to come back across for a floating glance. And when they start coming back, I look away and then float back across at the same time they do. Do they ever know I've studied them? Then I just happen to mention, that's a beautiful tie. Is that hand-painted? You try this and you'll be amazed. From that moment on, will they look at you? Right square in your eyes. Have they lost all fear of rejection? We all want to be told that we're wonderful. And we can't all come up here and stand up on top of the table and say, look at me, I'm wonderful. But we could buy a mink coat and do the same thing, though, couldn't we? Now, what if you really have something important to say? And what if you are afraid that if they keep talking any longer, you'll forget it? I'm sure you've had this experience many times because you have all these important ideas. What should you do? I found that two things will work. One is forget it. Because what's more important than my brilliant idea? The person I'm talking to. Now, if you can't follow that procedure, let me tell you the second method. Interrupt them and tell them, I've got a brilliant idea. Just take a few minutes. I'm going to jot it down on this piece of paper. And then go back and give them your undivided attention. But if you try to keep your idea in your mind while they finish what they're saying, you cannot listen to them. Now this concentration leads us to a tremendous temptation. They speak at the rate of 125 to 200 words a minute. My subconscious can handle 72,000 characters per minute. Now I want to subtract 175 from 72,000. Do I have spare time? By the way, can you imagine all the trips that all of you have taken tonight just since you've been listening to me? Wouldn't it be amazing to take all the trips that have gone through all of your heads and put them on the screen? We probably have more entertainment than anybody in Portland has ever had. But really, does this prove to you that you have a lot of spare time? Now, what we should do with this spare time is absolutely give it unconditionally to the person we're talking to. I know some people say, well, that's a waste of time. And normally these kind of people are planning next week's failures right while they're talking to you. Have you ever had people sit down and write on the desk while they're talking to you? There's only one thing that I can actually tell about a person by looking at their eyes. Have you ever talked to people and saw a glassiness come over their eyeball? That tells you just one thing: they've tuned you out. Now, what do you suppose we have to do this for? If I do not put a glassy film over my eyes, will I pick up every image my eyes see? Then my eyes could pick them up as fast as my subconscious. In other words, my eyes can pick up 72,000 characters per minute. So if I look, will I be occupied? So the secret is to do what? If I'm going to really do something else while I talk to you, is glass over the eyes so I don't pick up anything. So I would say this is all that we're going to tell. Otherwise, there's nothing else. We've had expressions that eyes are the windows of the soul, and that people can look in. Don't be afraid that people will know your secrets by looking in your eyes. Just looks right at them. Actually, if they want to stare at you and you feel uncomfortable, do look away for a matter of a second, but come right back. Because you can't expect people just to stare. But do not hesitate, though, to look at those eyes. You owe it to your actual subconscious for that much information to go in, to actually be able to carry on a good conversation. Have you ever heard people say, I open my mouth and put my foot in it? That's because they were not looking. In other words, if I look at you, my subconscious will keep me from putting my foot in my mouth. The A, which stands alone, stands for always believe you have a good memory. Now, what do I mean by this? The other day I was in a conversation. I was talking to somebody, and somebody said, I can't remember names. This always amuses me. So the minute they said I can't remember names, I said to myself, I have a perfect memory. Was I refuting what they had said? By the way, in our society, you can grow up just listening to people say, I can't remember names, and you will end up with a self-image of not being able to remember names just because you didn't fight it. That's how ingrained it is in a normal conversation. Now, this person went on and they said, I never could remember names. Now, this caught my attention because I looked at them again because they had raised their voice. I heard them the first time. Then it dawned on me they were not talking to me at all. They were talking to themselves. So I thought, well, I hope they heard themselves that time. Then they come back and they said, nobody can remember names. Now, what have they done? They have gone one step too far. They have decided that I'm not only incapable of memory, I'm not going to take the responsibility for it either. Then who's at fault? The Creator. How were we all made then? Incapable of being able to remember names. Now, if you're created that way, you have a complete excuse. Now you're innocent, scot-free. You can go on condemning the Creator the rest of your life without any blame on yourself. By the way, the third time, they were in a higher-pitched voice. Now, let me explain to you what happens psychologically to make a person do this. Let's assume I walk up to you and your name is John Smith. And I have a self-image that I can't remember names. Might I remember John Smith? If I remember John Smith, would I have behavior inconsistent with my self-image? Any behavior that's inconsistent with your self-image will cause you to crack up. In other words, you are not made to have behavior that's inconsistent with your self-image. In other words, everything in your whole being has to be a consistent entity for you to have individuality and identity. Now, if I have behavior that is not consistent, am I disturbed? Right now, the first person I meet after John Smith, they have a hard name. And I have watched people. The minute the person gives a name and they discern that it's a rather difficult name, why, they smile. Boy, I've had enough John Smiths because that ruins my whole psychological makeup. Now I got a difficult one that proves my self-image is correct. Now why do they get emotional and say it 3 times? They're convincing what? Their own being that the self-image is correct, and they can't. Now what do you have to do while they're blasting off 3 times? Block. You've got to refute it constantly so your self-image doesn't get the idea that what they're saying is true. So always believe you have a good memory. Ready for genius. We'll start with G. Gain is only by exchanging with people we know by name. Now this will be explained a little later on in the seminar when we go into the law of fair exchange and negotiation. But we'll find that the law of fair exchange is only possible in role relationship. And you cannot have role relationship without knowing the person by name. You will not set up a role relationship with a stranger. Therefore, since I say you will have to know him by name to have a role relationship, we say then that exchanging can only take place if you know somebody's name. And exchanging is the only way to actually have gain on this earth. And I don't think you're going to be happy until you have gain. So therefore we say that the entire ability for you to increase your riches, your wealth, your livelihood, your friendship is through knowledge of names. E. Engrave the name. And the word engrave means to deeply carve figures, letters, or devices upon. And by the way, I normally think of engraving with tombstones and granite. Now, what I would do with the people I know, after I have used a green felt pen to write their name on their forehead, and that night I'm laying in bed going to sleep, and people's faces come across my mind that I have talked to that day, what do you suppose I do with a chisel that night? I'm assuming your forehead is granite. I chisel the name on it. Now, you say, are we going too far? No. Because does this impress your mind that the name is there forever? You might believe that our hostess could take a dozen showers this week and do what with your green ink? Wash it off. But now, if you engrave it, will it be there forever? Plus, are you going back to repetition? And also, if I'm taking a pencil and writing on a piece of paper, am I as careful in transcribing as I would be with a chisel on a piece of granite? It's very interesting. There's very few spelling mistakes on granite. Why? Well, before you mess up a whole slab of granite, are you going to be sure you're right? You check it out more. Now, it might be that you'll have to get up out of bed that night and get the business card out again, because you wouldn't want to engrave an incorrect name on a forehead to be there forever.